Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Women in Manufacturing. I'm Lydia DiLiello, the CEO and founder of Capital Pricing Consultants, and I have the honor of hosting Women in Manufacturing this afternoon and to welcome our first guest of the year. So happy New Year, everyone. Wendy Feldstein, and Wendy is the VP of Design from Crestron Electronics, a North American-based company that is also multinational. Wendy, welcome to the program. We're so pleased to have you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Appreciate it.
So Wendy, tell us a little bit about Crestron and about yourself and your progression in the company.
Okay, well, it depends how far back you want to go. It's a long story. So there's the professional story when I'm here for over 30 years, started out doing basic drafting in AutoCAD, and then by the end of the day, I had done 3 designs and drawings and things like that. The department did everything from making the blueprints and working with purchasing to copy bill of materials for purchasing, as well as when the parts came in, going through and doing the quality control on them, what we call QC, and all of that stuff. And then later on in years, we were able to, we branched off a QC department, and I was telling the guy, okay, you need these calipers and this and that. And even when they were doing QC, they didn't have radius gauges and hole gauges. And I started getting more equipment so we could do better. And then as we evolved, I hired the first mechanical engineer into the department. It was just drafts people. And I was like, we need mechanical engineers. We need to up this department. And there were only about 3 drafts people, including myself, and then 1 circuit board designer. And so and then I was like, we can't have 1, we need to have a backup. And so over the years I started pulling in and developing, and then when we had like 5 good people and a manager that I hired specifically so we could do that, I kind of launched them on their own department.
So this is a family company, Wendy? This is
Yes.
your company?
So that's how I kind of got started and became just kept working and doing more things over the years. But if I go in the Wayback Machine, when I was in first grade, my dad was fired, and so he was unemployed, and he had 4 kids. My brother was just born, and a house with a mortgage, and so he had to do something. So he started repairing anything he could in our basement. And I remember they installed this phone, and back then you couldn't plug and unplug phones and move them around. It was like a dial phone, and it had hardwired. The phone company had to come, and we were all like staring at it. And we had a split level house, so it was in the basement. We were in the playroom looking down, and my dad's like, if the phone rings, do not answer it. Because back then, if phone rang, you always answered it.
Of course.
Not like today where we just ignore them all the time. But so it would ring, and we'd all open the door and kind of stare down and look at this phone ring like it was some magical bat phone or something. So that's how Crestron started, with a yellow page ad saying repairing electronics. And so moved on from there. Then he grew and expanded. And I remember the day he was moving out to this 2 rooms and a bathroom over the deli in Closter, New Jersey, and my bed would face down the hallway, and I was like, what are they doing? And I don't think any of the other kids noticed or paid attention, but for me, this was like intriguing. He's like, Lynn, because that's what we call my mom sometimes. And he's like, I need a roll of toilet paper. I need a comb. I need soap. And in my head, I'm like, what is he making? What would you make if you combined those things? Or are you wrapping the toilet paper around the comb and dipping it in the soap? And then he's like, I need a scissor. I'm like, is he using the scissor to cut the toilet paper? So I'm just like this first grader trying to like picture this like Rube Goldberg machine that he's about to make or something out of all these weird things. Well, it turned out I need a pad, I need a pen, I need a this, I need a ruler. So she's running around the house finding like whatever we have in whatever nooks and crannies of the house, and he's taking it in, and that's how the office started. So he hired his first employee there, and that guy used to carry my brother, who's now the CEO of the company, up the stairs because he was an infant if my mom had to go somewhere. And we'd go to work. I'd go to work in first grade I go after school and I bend resistors and capacitors over this little red form. And they had the different millimeter, like 5 and 6. And I was like, okay, I was 5 last year. Resistors go on 5. I'm 6 this year. Capacitors go on 6. And that's how I knew the spacing, because that's how you would have to bend the leads and then they'd go through a through hole board. And remember, like, I'm going to help dad. And I was like, I'm going to get through this. I finished the box and then another box came. I was like, okay, I'm like, I finished the box, and by the 6th box, I was like, okay, I got to pace myself.
So even at that young of an age, you were already deeply involved in design and had an interest in engineering and development. So can you tell us a little bit about the breadth of products that Crestron offers?
Sure. So we started out very simple with fade dissolve slide projectors. If people remember that, it's where you would have, we didn't have video like you have today. So if you were doing a presentation, you would show a slide and another slide would come in, and it was a big deal not to go slide, slide, slide. It was a big deal. People would have like 5 or 6 projectors set up, and they would have like somebody walking down the street and they'd have the soundtrack of like the sound of their feet, and you would see like it fade in and out as it went, as like somebody walked down the street. So that was a big deal. Or you could to do a presentation and have a list of slides, and instead of pulling them in and out of the slide projector, you could go to specific numbers, or you could have it so it would do numbers in a certain order. So you didn't have, like, if you wanted to reorder your slides for something, you just had to have them all in the carousel. Otherwise, people would be picking them out and looking at them, and they'd go in upside down or backwards. And so this way, it just created much more ease in the industry. And then he got involved with this guy who was doing, he was building and helping him design for audio video control. And then that guy went out of business. So my dad was left with all this equipment. So he was like, all right, we'll just sell it as Crestron. And so, because the guy gave him all whatever rights or whatever when it went out. So he started selling this control equipment, and the rest is history. So then once you give my dad something, and I guess I'm kind of the same way, we're going to improve on it and make it better. And oh, well, that's a thing, but this also feature, oh, somebody said they want to do that. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's do that. And it just evolved and evolved. And then we were doing control systems. We had a software engineer for many years. Now we have many software engineers. And we had some hardware engineers. And like I said, when I came in, it was all just drafts people, and George doing, he was an electrical engineer by degree, but he was very mechanical. He grew up on the Lower East Side with no money, digging through garbage cans, pulling things out, building new things, going down to Canal Street to get parts. So years later, when I was in college, I started out at University of Michigan my first year, but then I moved closer to my roots, I guess, back here. I went to Pratt in Brooklyn, where I have a Bachelor of Industrial Design. So when I was there, I'd go to Canal Street and buy plastics and things and weld them together. And you just got quite the education down there. Sadly, I don't think it's the same anymore. I haven't been down in years. And you could find anything and everything in any part. So one day I go to a friend's house, like way out somewhere. By that time, I had moved into Manhattan. I went to NYU for graduate school. I was at the Tisch Graduate School doing master's of set design and art direction. I was only there for a year. I didn't finish it out, and because I was like, I've just got to work. I was like done with school at that point. I was like, I just got to work. And so I worked in that industry for several years, doing different types of projects and different challenges and things, like making a fake axe out of foam and making it look realistic and hanging it on the wall. And when they took it off, making sure it looked like it was faded behind there. So all those like little details I had to make sure, like, I was like, well, when he takes it off the wall, it's going to look like it was new, and it's supposed to look like it's a family heirloom. I have to like paint watercolor on your wall so I can wipe it off so your mom's not mad at you after we use her house, So different things like that. Or creating an abandoned building in someone's basement by getting big pieces of cardboard that I could kind of lay around and then melt and make dirt all over so I didn't damage their house. So I got into that stuff. And then had dinner. My parents came in the city, and we went out to dinner, and my dad's like, oh, we're hiring an entry-level drafts person. You want to come just learn AutoCAD? It's another skill, because I was a little like done with the set design art direction world, because I almost met a couple, got on a union job, and you had to get on a union job to get in the union. It was this whole thing. So they hired somebody because they had a van, and I had all the experience, but they didn't want to pay to rent a van. I was like, I can drive a van. They just didn't want to rent a van. So,
Funny how
I,
life has serendipitous turns that move us in a direction, right? But yet clearly your experience in the art world is what gives Crestron the ability to create these new products for the commercial marketplace, for audio and visual, that are very appealing to the eye as well as very functional. So I think that that's a really neat kind of way that you have combined the two careers, or the melded one in and used it for the other. How have you, with the breadth of experience that you have, Wendy, how have you seen women's roles changing and evolving in design over the years? Because you have the benefit of having seen quite a bit.
yeah,
What do
it's
you
fun.
see what do you see that's changing? I think that's great.
Yeah. So here's the thing too. When we were kids, we would work really hard, because in our high school, if you got an A first quarter, second quarter, midterm, and then third and fourth quarter, you didn't have to take the final, you got exempt. And so we would work really hard to do that, because if we got exempt from all the finals, or at least a few of the finals, depending on when they fell, that week of finals is when Infocom, a big industry trade show, would always happen. Now it happens earlier in June, but that back then it was a little later in June. And so we would go, and we would go and have sorry, okay, never mind. So we would go and we would have we'd help at the trade show. So it was my mom, my dad, me, my sister, the one sales guy, and the one secretary. And that's who would man, or woman, the booth. There were actually more women, but and so we would go, and my dad would be like, here's flyers, just lure people in, as they walk by the trade show.
Pass them out.
Hey, you want to learn about this? Hey, you want to learn about that? So we'd stand there, and then they'd ask some really technical question, and I'm like, you need to talk to him. They're like, can it do this? And I was like, just a minute. So we did that, and so it was kind of fun. So when we would go around, and we'd have a chance to walk around the trade show or check different things out, and it was really funny. When it was in Texas one year, they had the Dallas Cowgirl cheerleaders at one booth to lure people in. And you'd walk around, and every single booth had scantily clad women, breasts showing, short skirts, or even if they were in an evening gown, it was low cut spaghetti strap with a really high slit in ridiculously high heels. And like these models they would hire to kind of lure men in, like men needed these sirens to lure them in, like, isn't your product good enough? And even at a young age, I was like, what's with that? And the good news is fine, and you would see that start to fade a little bit over the years, and now really you don't see it anymore at all, thank goodness, which
Thank
is
goodness.
good. You do every now and then at a booth, they'll do something weird, and they'll hire, an actor or an actress to do something. But it was just so sexist. And the only women that were really in the industry were either fighting in there to be heard, or secretaries, and even the women who were fighting to be heard were the lackeys and weren't at the same level. And it's still that way. Most of the bigger industries don't have as many women at the top, slow to move up. Most of the installers and the programmers were not women, although now you see more women programmers and things like that, which is good, but the men still definitely outweigh it. And there is a group, AVIXA, which is trying to get more women involved into the AV industry. And I think it's been going, but it's a slow go. You still have the men who were in there when it was all this male dominated, kind of like toxic environment, and they're still in the industry, a lot of them. So it continues on. And if the next generation of women, it's really sadly, well, we have to hope that there's some men allies that are demanding this and seeing this. But
But it
it's
sounds,
really women demanding more professionalism just by being there.
but it sounds like, Wendy, there are some changes based upon what you've said relative to, so the sirens are pretty much out. And so now it's much more product based,
Yeah,
which I think automatically gives women a much greater opportunity to step up and provide product knowledge, which at the end of the day is what that sale is about.
correct.
And you said that you're seeing more and more women coming in, and in smaller companies, if I understood what you were saying properly, then there are more women in more senior positions, which is breaking new ground for the industry, even
Well,
if the
no, I
large
wouldn't
companies.
say there's women in senior positions. There's more women coming into the industry. And
Okay, but not, still not like yourself in senior roles.
hopefully, they'll be embraced and cultivated and allowed to rise.
So you're really a trailblazer in this industry.
I seem to always be in a male dominated world, since I'm a kid, when I was
Sure.
in kindergarten, and we moved to the house we were in Cresskill. My dad had a whole shop in the basement. It was like, well, here are the tools you can use when I'm not home. And if you want to use that bigger saw or this kind of thing, you can. I was like, well, can I use the vice grip? And, so there were like all different tools. And I loved the pegboard with all the tools hanging on them. And I'd sit there and I'd use the hand drill. I couldn't use the drill press when he wasn't there, but I could use the
Sure.
hand drill, and I drilled through the wood and I'd clamp it down, and then I'd look and I'm like, oh, look at the drill bit and look at the shape it made inside the hole, and all sorts of like weird things that, kids today don't get to just go play in the basement with nails and hammers when nobody's watching you. And my mom was busy with the baby, my brother Daniel. And
Sure.
then one day my brother was downstairs, my other brother, so I have one that's 3 years younger than me and one that's 6 years younger than me. So the one that's 3 years younger than me was allowed to sit on the basement stairs and watch me work, but he couldn't work, so there was a lot of empowerment in just being able to play with the physical things and mess around with them. And a lot of people don't get that opportunity, which, is sad.
But I think that from what you're sharing with us, that's absolutely helped build who you are, and the expertise, obviously, that you bring to the company and lead the company with now, because of having had all of those experiences. Is there any advice that you would give here as we're wrapping up to women who are entering this field?
Um, I just went to this really great women in tech program in the city. They do them all over the country, and it was really wonderful. It was wonderful to be in a room of high tech, tech savvy women, and all the trade show booths were all women talking to women. It was something so weird and unusual, and that's how the industry's
Starting to
moving ahead
change.
and doing great things. And one of the best advice that I got, that I haven't really done myself, but that I got from this woman that I happened to sit next to at one of the things, and then she was on a panel, she said, take inventory, write down what you're doing as you're doing it, kind of like a resume, and keep those bullet points and keep like the date and what you've done and how you're doing and why you're doing, kind of like a running resume and sort of like a running log, because one day you may need that as a tool to say, this is what I've done, this is why I deserve this position. And to one, earn your way there, prove yourself. But then once you've done that, you have to ask in a professional, kind way for what you deserve, and not to just wait, because it's not going to happen if you just wait and you hope somebody sees you. It happens in the male world that way, but not in the female world.
And I think that is tremendous advice, Wendy, to share with our viewers and our listeners, because it's about documenting and then self-advocating in a professional way. And I think that translates across any industry. So we thank you so much for sharing Crestron with us today and your experiences And we wish you all the very best with Crestron as you continue. So once again, Wendy, thank you very much for being our guest on Women in Manufacturing today. And listeners, as you all know, we have several other podcasts available to you. If you visit jacketmediacompany.com, we have 4 other manufacturing podcasts, including Manufacturing Talk Radio, the WHAM podcast, which of course you're very familiar with, Hazard Girls, which highlights women who are working in very unusual roles in women's industry, and also Manufacturing Matters with Cliff Waldman, and he's speaking to guests on manufacturing and the economy. So until next time, we look forward to having you tune in again to Women in Manufacturing. Thank you.